From the academy to the command post, the Weekend Wrap-Up podcast covers the leadership lessons, mentorship, and tough conversations needed to build a resilient firehouse. Rated as one of the best fire and emergency services podcasts, get ready to be empowered by host Kevin Ferrara as he presents another informative episode you won't want to miss. Get ready, folks. Here we go.
Welcome, everybody. You're listening to AFSO 21's Weekend Wrap-Up podcast. Here is your host, Kevin Ferrara.
Today, we're diving into something that touches every single person listening right now, whether you realize it or not. Let me start by asking you this question. Have you noticed that over the last few years, the ambient level of irritability in our culture feels like it's set to a permanent boil? We talk a lot about social media algorithms, that lack of sleep, economic stress, and caffeine overload. And yes, those do matter. But what if part of the short fuse you felt in traffic yesterday, or that sudden out-of-character spike of anger during a low-stakes argument, isn't just psychological? What if it's biochemical? More specifically, what if invisible synthetic compounds circulating in your blood right now are tweaking your brain's chemistry, throwing your thyroid completely out of balance, and lowering your threshold for rage? Welcome, everyone, to another episode of AFSO 21's Weekend Wrap-Up podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ferrara, and today we're talking about PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, better known as forever chemicals. Most news reports focus on PFAS because they're linked to kidney cancer, high cholesterol, or thyroid disease. But today, we're following a line of emerging research that receives far less attention: the neuroendocrine and psychiatric connection. We're asking a critical question. Could chronic toxic overload from forever chemicals be quietly fueling human irritability, mood swings, and emotional dysregulation? So grab a glass of filtered water, and by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly what kind of filter you need. So let's get into it. To understand how these chemicals might alter your mood, we first have to understand what they actually are and why they are so indestructible. As I said, PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's a family of over 12,000 plus synthetic organofluorine compounds. A lot of tongue twisters in this episode today, so please bear with me. They don't exist in nature. Every single molecule was synthesized in a lab starting around the 1940s, believe it or not. So what makes PFAS so useful in industrial applications and so dangerous in the human body? Well, it's the carbon-fluorine bond, or CF. In organic chemistry, the bond between a carbon atom and a fluorine atom is one of the strongest single bonds that exists. Nature's microbes, enzymes, sunlight, and metabolic processes simply don't have the shears required to break it apart. That's why they've earned the moniker forever chemicals. Back in the mid-20th century, companies like 3M and DuPont, they discovered that coating certain products in fluoropolymers made them almost completely impervious to water, oil, heat, and friction. So think about your daily routine. The nonstick skillet, PTFE, here's another one of those tongue twisters, polytetrafluoroethylene, famously known as Teflon. Water repellent products, rain jackets, hiking boots, stain-resistant furniture and carpet treated with fluorosurfactants. Food packaging, your fast food wrappers, microwave popcorn bags, pizza boxes, they're lined with grease-resistant coatings. And for those in emergency service, we know firefighting foams and turnout gear, aqueous film-forming foam, or AFFF, used at military bases and airports, they heavily contaminated groundwater across the globe. Those products were heavily contaminated with certain chemicals, and those chemicals got into the groundwater across the globe and destroyed the underground aquifer systems, like you've heard me talk about on social media about Cannon Air Force Base and other bases, Langley Air Force Base. And I also mentioned turnout gear. So we know PFAS has been found and detected in turnout gear, even to this day when certain manufacturers are claiming their products are, quote, PFAS free. So here's the kicker. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, they tested blood samples across the United States, and they estimate that over 98% of Americans have detectable levels of PFAS in their serum. Now, these detectable levels, they could range anywhere from very small numbers to significant levels of PFAS in the blood serum. And for me personally, I have quite a bit of PFAS in my blood, in particular PFOS and PFHXS. And those are two of the most notorious that we're seeing in blood tests today. So because these compounds take years, sometimes decades, to clear from the human tissue through a process known as bioaccumulation, we're all effectively carrying an ongoing chemical burden. So now let's connect the dots to your brain and your mood. How does a chemical in a nonstick pan or drinking water end up influencing whether you snap at your spouse or feel unexplained anxiety? Well, there's three primary biological pathways at play here. The first is thyroid disruption. Your thyroid gland sits at the base of your neck and acts as the master regulator for your metabolism, energy levels, and neurotransmitter synthesis. PFAS molecules structurally resemble fatty acids and thyroid hormones. So when PFAS binds to thyroid transport proteins or thyroid receptors, it interferes with normal hormone signaling. So there's things called subclinical hypothyroidism, and that's the low thyroid activity. It's well documented to cause brain fog, depression, lethargy, and low tolerance for stress. And then there's hyperthyroid spikes or hormonal fluctuations. And these are shifts in available thyroid hormone, and they directly alter how sensitive your, here's another tongue twister, amygdala. And I'm probably butchering these, so please bear with me. So this is the brain's fear and threat center, is to everyday stress triggers. And then we have the HPA axis dysregulation and stress hyperreactivity. And the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA, manages your fight or flight response. So when you encounter a stressor, your adrenal glands release cortisol and adrenaline. Studies demonstrate that exposure to persistent organic pollutants, or POPs, including long-chain PFAS compounds, they can cause chronic low-grade activation or dysregulation of the HPA axis. So when your baseline cortisol curve is flattened or permanently elevated, your brain remains in a state of hypervigilance. Minor annoyances, such as a loud noise or a mild delay, they're processed by the nervous system, not as mild inconveniences, but as active threats. And the psychological result, immediate reactive anger or hostility. And then we have neuroinflammation and neurotransmitter interference. PFAS compounds can cross the blood-brain barrier, and that's the protective semi-permeable membrane separating circulating blood from your brain tissue. And once inside brain tissue, PFAS can induce, another tongue twister, microglia activation, triggering localized neuroinflammation. Furthermore, animal studies show that PFAS exposure interferes with key neurotransmitter systems. So we have dopamine, which is essential for motivation, reward processing, and impulse control. And then GABA, G-A-B-A, or gamma, I'm going to butcher this, aminobutyric acid, the brain's primary inhibitory calming neurotransmitter. When GABA signaling is dampened, impulse control drops, making it significantly harder to hold back an angry outburst. So let me share some specific studies that shed light on this connection. There's studies involving childhood and adolescent behavioral studies, and the epidemiological research examining prenatal and early childhood PFAS exposure shows consistent links to emotional dysregulation, ADHD-like symptoms, and conduct difficulties. A landmark study analyzing cohort data found that children with higher serum concentrations of PFOS and PFOA showed significantly higher scores for impulsivity, aggressive behavior, and externalizing problems. When a child's brain is exposed to endocrine disruptors during critical neural developmental windows, the neural circuits governing self-regulation and impulse inhibition don't construct themselves with the same resilience. And then there's the adult neuropsychiatric impact studies. Well, what about adults? While adult studies are still catching up, research on populations living in contaminated water districts revealed elevated rates of self-reported anxiety, depression, and mood instability. When researchers control for socioeconomic factors, living in areas with high PFAS contamination correlates with higher physiological stress markers and lower self-reported emotional well-being. The key takeaway? Anger and irritability are often the emotional expressions of an overburdened, inflamed nervous system. If your body is constantly processing toxic burden while battling hormonal disruption, your emotional buffer shrinks to zero. Now, I know this sounds alarming, but the goal here isn't panic, it's agency. You can't control every environmental factor, but you can drastically reduce your personal exposure starting today. So here's a practical step-by-step protocol. Step 1, upgrade your water filtration. Tap water is the largest single contributor to daily PFAS intake. Standard pitcher filters, your simple gravity carbon type. They remove some taste, but often fail to filter short-chain PFAS effectively. And then we have the reverse osmosis, the RO systems. These are the gold standard. RO systems remove up to 95 to 99% of PFAS compounds. And then there's the activated carbon, certified. Look specifically for filters certified under NSF or ANSI, Standard 53 or Standard 58 for PFOA and PFAS reduction. The second step, overhaul your kitchen. Ditch those damaged nonstick pans. If your nonstick pan is scratched, throw it out immediately. Scratches accelerate the flaking and leaching of synthetic polymers into your food. Switch to inert cookware. Use cast iron, enamel-coated cast iron, stainless steel, or 100% ceramic. And then rethink your food storage. Avoid reheating food in grease-resistant paper or disposable containers. Instead, use glass or stainless steel containers. And the third step, support natural elimination pathways. While the human half-life of compounds like PFOS range from anywhere between 2 and 5 years, supporting your body's natural elimination systems can reduce overall toxic burden over time. There's the bile-binding and soluble fiber. PFAS undergoes another really big tongue twister here. Enterohepatic circulation, meaning the liver excretes it into bile, but the intestines reabsorb it before it exits the body. Consuming adequate soluble fiber, your oats, chia seeds, those type of things, peanuts, they bind bile acids into the gut so they can be excreted rather than reabsorbed. Stay hydrated and sweating. Regular cardiovascular activity or sauna therapy supports overall lymphatic clearance and cellular health. So, as we wrap up and I gather my tongue from all the tongue twisters, I want to leave you with a broader perspective. We're living through a unique period in human history. For the first time, our species, the human species, is navigating an environment saturated with synthetic, non-biodegradable chemistry. It's easy to look at the state of public discourse, road rage, and ambient stress, and blame it entirely on culture or technology. But biology and environment, well, they're deeply intertwined. When we protect our water, clean up our kitchens, lower our body burden of industrial toxins, we aren't just protecting our kidneys or our thyroids, we're protecting our brains, our resilience, and our patience. The next time you feel an unexpected surge of inexplicable irritability or brain fog, take a step back. Ask yourself, how is my physical baseline right now? Have I drank clean water? Have I reduced my body stress load? Take control of the variables you can influence. Upgrade your water filter. Ditch the scratch skillet. Feed your gut fiber. And give your nervous system the clean environment it needs to thrive. So, folks, I want to thank you for spending your valuable time with me today as I unknowingly butchered some of these terms. But seriously, if this episode was eye-opening for you, or it stirred up some thought, share it with a friend. Share it with your leaders. Like and subscribe the podcast. And if you're inclined to do so, please leave a comment. I truly want to hear your thoughts on this and other episodes that I've been able to bring to you. So until next time, stay safe, stay curious, stay informed, and please take care of yourselves. With that, I'm out of here.
Thanks for listening. To follow Kevin and the Weekend Wrap-Up podcast from your favorite streaming platform, open the podcast description and then click the Support the Show link, or go to afso21.com. From there, click the Weekend Wrap-Up podcast link, which will allow you to follow the show, download episodes, learn more about our contributors and the podcast. Subscribe, which gives you exclusive access to premium and/or bonus episodes, or support the show, where you can make a much-appreciated contribution of your choice. You can even click on the podcasts we love to build your personal podcast library. We here at the Weekend Wrap-Up Podcast appreciate you and look forward to bringing you more episodes that support the work you're doing in fire and emergency services. Remember, click the Support the Show link or head over to our website at afso21.com. Stay safe.